North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. We give you the news, the real news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out each. We make commentary. That is not the news. Then we debate the aforementioned, the news, the analysis, the commentary. You can do that by joining us a couple of different ways. You can join us by meeting us on the chat room. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and more. But whatever you do, just log in and say hi. We'd love to have you. Don't forget, if you want to contribute to the Wells Report, go to patreon.com, patreon.com. And you can join us if you'd like. If you'd like to support the Wells Report, I sure would appreciate it. It'd be very, very nice if you lent us a hand. A lot of things today. But first, before we get to any of that, Yvonne Field, by the way, wins the chat room derby. She's the first through today. Let me explain what happened the last couple of days of last week. I was planning on taking Friday off. And Jay Randall DuPape. Jay Randall, how are you, brother? How's that beautiful car of yours? Anyway. So I was planning on taking Friday off anyway. Had a Texas State Guard thing. And by the way, when I bring up the Texas State Guard, I don't talk for the Texas State Guard or the Texas Military Department. Anything I say about the Texas State Guard is my sole responsibility. Has nothing to do with the Texas State Guard or the Texas Military Department. But we had a magnificent conference that I was able to go to. And all I can say is that your Texas State Guard is in fine shape and getting better every day. It is a privilege to serve in that organization. And I got to say that it was just a very good conference. So I was planning on taking Friday off anyway. But then on Thursday, my son came up to me and said, hey, I'm having some weird vision things and blah, blah, blah. And I went, excuse me? and we went through a quick little thing, and then I took him to the emergency room. And we sat there for a while, and the doc came in and diagnosed Colton with atypical migraine. I have atypical migraine. It is one gift that I wish I had not passed along to my son. And he had his first migraine headache on Thursday, but we didn't know what it was, so we double-checked. He got a CAT scan. It was the first time I'd ever seen a doctor describe a CAT scan as beautiful. So the kid's got a good brain. Now, if he'll only learn to use it. Sorry, I had a dad moment. That being said, that was why I missed Thursday and Friday. I want to thank James Parker, the great James Parker, the author and host of The James Show, for sitting in on Thursday. That was awfully cool. He took that show on last second notice. It was awesome. And so there you go. Yeah, it was one of those. It's like I got my first migraine headache when I think I was in 8th grade. And that's when they changed the corn that we eat in the United States to a genetically modified kind of corn. It's pervasive now. It's everywhere. And I'm allergic to it. And I don't know whether this was an allergic response or stress or what have you. He's working virtually full time and going to college virtually full time. So he's got a lot on his plate. And that was the issue. That was the issue that was going on. So I just wanted to let you know he's fine. We're fine. Although we spent several heart squeezing hours waiting for the doctor who was brilliant, Dr. Jones. Dr. Jones at the Texas Health Hospital right around the corner. And he spent some time with us and did a fantastic job with Colton. And it was, like I said, it was heart squeezing there for a while, but we're okay. So that's what has been going on. Let's see. That's a great question, General. Or no, wait, you're still a colonel, aren't you? Colonel, that's actually a great question. He asks, hey, JD, why didn't the DOJ simply call Trump and say we want these documents? Your guess is as good as mine. Your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea, but that's a perfect transition to what we're discussing. This from Fox News. As a former U.S. attorney with a criminal career that spans decades, this, by the way, is Brett Tolman writing this for Fox News. It's an opinion piece. I find it remarkable that some in the legal profession are already willing to close the case on the FBI warrant to search former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home based on the heavily redacted affidavit. The unredacted portions of the affidavit attempt to convince the reader the Department of Justice is on good and legal footing. But unless the redacted portions contain some sort of bombshell, this warrant could only ever be upheld because the probable cause standard has sunk well below what our founding fathers believed they were enshrining within the Bill of Rights, specifically the Fourth Amendment. This is what Mr. Tolman found as 5 things from the Mar-a-Lago affidavit. Now, remember, this is an opinion piece, okay? So this is just opinion. But I figured it was something that you ought to have. There's little effort addressing the significance of apparent exculpatory evidence and mitigating facts. Now, that's something that I brought up several times. Now, understand something. I'm about to tell you about how the Department of Justice has all these documents. They've gone through all of them. Now, the Director of National Intelligence is going to go through all of them and come up with an assessment about what kind of risk there was because Donald Trump had these documents. Okay, we'll get to that coming up a little bit later on. But this is important. Unless there is, let me read this one more time to you. Unless there is, in the redacted portions, unless there's a bombshell in there, the warrant could only ever be upheld because the probable cause standard is sunk well below what our founding fathers believed they were enshrining in the Fourth Amendment. And that's completely correct. That's completely correct. This was a fishing expedition, in my opinion. And also, by the way, the DOJ has these documents, and I'm sure that what they're going to do is they're going to follow in the footsteps of the January 6th committee and cherry pick the results of their sorting through the documents and leak them to what is a biased press, therefore controlling the narrative for whatever reason. All right. First, little time addressing the evidence of apparent exculpatory evidence. The January 6th committee presented no exculpatory evidence. That's evidence that proves that Donald Trump was not doing what they said he was doing. And mitigating facts thrown out the window. While it includes a letter from Trump's lawyers, it does not acknowledge the potential advice of counsel, defense, or any authority to bring such a case against a former U.S. president or even refute the issues raised by Trump's lawyers in any meaningful way. Surprisingly, in a case seeking to tread this kind of new legal ground, and remember, it is new legal ground, there's no accompanying memo from the DOJ Office of Legal Counsel defending the legality, probably because they can't. Further, the affidavit references the applicable law, but withholds any mention of court decisions regarding a U.S. president's unfettered ability to declassify documents. It fails to inform the court that a former U.S. president may fall outside the criminal statute. In fact, he does. And how do I know that? Well, because President Obama issued an executive order regarding this very subject, exempting both the president and the vice president from any kind of gobbledygook like this. And by the way, redacted, there are pages in this redacted affidavit that are completely redacted. They're completely gone. I mean, as a matter of fact, if you happen to be watching on any of the live stream right now, I'm going to show it to you. Okay, I'm going to show this to you here. Oh wait, why didn't that work? Oops, that's not what I wanted. I wanted this one. See that? See that right there? If you can see my mouse, and you can. No, you can't. Let me use this one. There you go. If you see that little bitty teeny weeny mouse right there, little bitty mouse, you can see that this is one of the pages from the redacted affidavit. It is completely and totally redacted. They're hiding stuff. Why? All you need to redact are the person's names. Now, they believe that what also has to be redacted is we have to redact not just the witness names, but the information that they swore to in the affidavit to theoretically, and I mean this, theoretically establish probable cause. The reason that they don't want you to see the statements they made to provide a probable cause argument to the judge is because it would reveal sources and methods. In other words, with the information from the particular witnesses, you'd be able to determine who the witnesses were. Now, that's real convenient. The Fourth Amendment was created specifically to stop this kind of garbage. Garbage. That's why we have the Fourth Amendment and the Bill of Rights. Outrageous. Here's something else. Second, it's hard to find criminal intent anywhere in the unredacted affidavit. If it's in there, it's redacted, since no visible language includes to any individual willfully retaining documents or otherwise violating laws the FBI alleges to have been broken. To the contrary, the affidavit includes instances of the return of boxes of material to the U.S. government, and the affidavit reads more like a document dispute in a civil case in which lawyers for both sides conduct a back and forth chock full of legal arguments. Okay, that makes sense. Not from a standpoint that it establishes probable cause. But you have to understand something. There is at least intent for the president to cooperate with the return of these documents. Remember, this affidavit is supposed to tell us why they pulled off the Mar-a-Lago raid. What was the probable cause? They don't do that here. The president was cooperating. Why the Mar-a-Lago raid? They were in Mar-a-Lago a month before. They could have taken any of that material then. As a matter of fact, the president made it clear to his lawyers at the time, in the presence of FBI investigators, that they should cooperate fully. At that point, the FBI guys say, well, we'd like to have all this information, please. Okay, take it. Once again, we're discussing this because this is supposed to be an affidavit that justifies the Mar-a-Lago raid. And we don't see that yet. As a matter of fact, what we do see is the actual affidavit pointing out that the president was indeed cooperating. Third, we still don't know who the target or targets of the warrant are. The affidavit is filled with conclusory, I've never heard that word, conclusory statements such as, there is probable cause, but the unredacted language gives no reference to whom the probable cause applies. There's more. We're going to give it to you. We're going to go through all of this hour on the Wells Report. If you find value in this broadcast, please share it with your friends. And by all means, subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe. I'd kind of like to make a go out of this because I'd kind of like to be able to tell you what's going on, because I know for a fact that I'm not going to either screw it up or twist it beyond truth. I will present the truth, and I don't care whose political ox gets gored. That's why you're paying attention to the Wells Report. Hope you keep doing so. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We're going through the things that people think you should know about the release of the Mar-a-Lago raid affidavit, the one that was supposed to create some form of probable cause. Now, this is an opinion piece. It comes to us from Fox News. Brett Tolman, who happens to be a former U.S. attorney with a criminal justice career spanning decades. First thing he says is there's not a lot of effort at addressing significant exculpatory evidence and mitigating facts. In other words, there's nothing in there. And the only thing that's in there that is exculpatory so far is the president of the United States was cooperating. It's crazy. This is also interesting. In a case seeking to tread new legal ground, there's no accompanying memo from the DOJ Office of Legal Counsel. The affidavit references applicable law, but withholds any mention of court decisions regarding a U.S. president's unfettered ability to declassify documents. In point of fact, there was something that came out a little while ago that talked a little bit about how President Biden revoked the executive privilege of President Trump. In point of fact, he did not. The person that, for all intents and purposes, decided to forego President Trump's executive privilege was an archivist at the National Archives, because President Biden didn't want to be the guy that got rid of executive privilege. And so what ended up happening was, the archivist said, Bob, go right ahead to the FBI. Go right ahead. He doesn't have any executive privilege. That's not a decision that person can make. Now, the whole thing's going to end up in court. And I don't care what federal court you find in it. If they still read the Constitution as a federal judge, then it's going to be a open and shut opinion that, no, the president has executive privilege to avoid exactly this kind of political garbage. The political garbage involving using the U.S. code as a political weapon. It looks more and more like that every single day. Second, no criminal intent is discussed anywhere in the unredacted portions of the affidavit. That's where somebody says an individual willfully retained documents or made some sort of thing or what have you. Willfully is an important word. Okay, that's where they bring up the fact, that's where this guy, Mr. Tolman, brings up the fact that actually the president was cooperating. Third, we don't know the target or targets of the warrant. The affidavit is filled with conclusory statements. There is probable cause, but once again, the unredacted language gives no reference to whom the probable cause applies. Clearly, the location of the warrant suggests the FBI may be going after President Trump, but the lack of any evidence in the unredacted portions directly implicating him criminally, as well as the government's failure to address significant legal issues uniquely surrounding a former president's authority, mean that he may not be the only one targeted, or may not be the target at all. There's also another point. Remind me to bring you the last point that nobody's brought up yet, okay? Fourth, perhaps nowhere do the redacted portions have more work to do than the alleged evidence of obstruction. In the unredacted section, the FBI acknowledges the return of 15 boxes of materials and ongoing communications with Trump lawyers, attempting to resolve any outstanding disputes, which the remaining documents ought to be turned over. This would appear to provide evidence of cooperation with authorities rather than obstruction. Exactly. And then there's fifth, unredacted portions don't answer the questions, why are we doing this now? Timing is a critical piece of any warrant. While one would expect much of that to be answered in the redacted portions, there's nothing in the unredacted suggestions to suggest why the FBI felt it needed a warrant and needed one right this very moment. Okay, so that's one person's opinion. We have another article on that. This one from The Guardian regarding all of this. This will probably be more news-oriented, and we'll get that to you as we come back to tell you a little bit more about this redacted Mar-a-Lago affidavit. It looks like more of the cover-up in plain sight. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. And good afternoon. Welcome to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We make commentary and we debate. Please go to the chat room and spend time with us. It would be awesome. Okay? This next article comes from The Guardian. And strangely enough, they're also asking for a little bit of support monetarily. So go to theguardian.com, and if you got a couple of bucks, why don't you throw them a bone or two? That would be good. They also have 5 things that you need to keep in mind regarding the Mar-a-Lago affidavit. This from Hugo Lowell in New York. The FBI sought to search President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida after it found probable cause that highly sensitive defense information and evidence of obstruction of justice existed there. Here are what they say. Their 5 takeaways. New details on probable cause. Foremost in the affidavit, the Justice Department had good reason to believe there were crimes being committed in specific areas of Mar-a-Lago, including Trump's home, the foyer to his residence known as Pine Hall, his 45 office, and his storage facility, among other locations. That, by the way, satisfies the Fourth Amendment need for description of the items to be taken and the place that they are located. That does not explain why they were rifling through the president's wife's clothing. We still don't know what that's all about. The affidavit did not offer an indication about potential charges, but it did mention the FBI believed that there was evidence of obstruction that would be found at the premises. Why would there be obstruction? The president had at that time, in January, already turned in 15 boxes of materials. And then said, by all means, go cooperate fully. There is no obstruction here. But it's in the affidavit as some sort of predicate to probable cause. This is beginning to stink, in my humble opinion. There was new detail on FBI sources. Speculation has swirled for weeks that President Trump and his team about how the FBI knew the location of his safe in specific rooms where sensitive documents remained. The Justice Department appeared to offer a glimpse into where that information may have originated. The DOJ said in a legal memo explaining its redactions to the affidavit, it was seeking to protect a significant number of civilian witnesses, the first such references surrounding its sources, as well as the FBI and government personnel, as well as the FBI and U.S. government personnel. So the FBI knew about the storage room because they had been there in June. They also knew about the office. They also knew about the foyer, and so on and so forth. The location of the safe, other government personnel, Secret Service detail member. Secret Service detail member. Classification is irrelevant. Around the discussion of the affidavit about classified or declassified materials being retained by President Trump, the Justice Department noted the classification does not matter for violations of the Espionage Act or statutes concerning the removal of official documents. Okay, so there's a couple of problems here. First of all, there is no provable espionage. In order for there to be espionage, they had to have some sort of information that said that someone was going to be able to get around existing personnel from the Secret Service Presidential Security Detail, get to these documents, photograph them, and get out all without any kind of requests for information or identification or anything like that. That's problem number one. So the Espionage Act, there has to be espionage. Now, if President Trump had done something remarkably stupid, which was to put all of these things in an electronic format and put it in a server that had been accessed by, say, for example, the Chinese intelligence services, that's a predicate for espionage. But if these are just sitting in just pieces of paper in a box, and the entire premises is being guarded by the Secret Service, where's the opportunity for espionage? Also, by the way, one other thing. President Trump did not pack this material. Members of the Government Accounting Office packed this material. Who is to say that someone at the GAO that happened to be a part of, oh, I don't know, the deep state put information in those boxes? I'm not saying that they're a part of this grand conspiracy. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But the chain of evidence has been broken. President Trump didn't take those materials out. Sandy Berger took those materials out. Hillary Clinton knew about every piece of material that was put in that private server because she put it there. How do we know that President Trump had anything to do with the GAO, the Government Accounting Office, packing up those boxes? All right, so classification is irrelevant. By the way, that is true in espionage cases. Are they accusing President Trump of espionage? On what basis? What's the story about that? Like I said, if he was dumb enough to have an open server or something like that, by golly, that's a violation of the Espionage Act. We know that to be true because, well, somebody else did that. And by the way, the somebody else that did that was not a president of the United States with sole capable executive capability to declassify as they see fit. That was the Secretary of State. The FBI's underlying basis for concern as part of the justification for seeking a search warrant for Mar-a-Lago. The affidavit detailed how an FBI review of materials Trump had returned to the National Archives demonstrated a track record of keeping some U.S. government's most sensitive secrets at Mar-a-Lago. That's some mighty fancy detective work right there. The Justice Department said that among the documents recovered by the National Archives, 184 had classification markings. Some also had markings denoting SI for special intelligence, HCS for intelligence from human clandestine sources, and no foreign, not releasable to foreign nationals. By the way, in case you're wondering about no foreign, if you go to eBay right now, you can purchase you can purchase items that are not allowed to leave the country to foreign buyers. So no foreign is so. Some people close to President Trump have tried to suggest they were surprised the Justice Department considered the storage room as inadequate to keep boxes of classified information because officials had supposedly only asked for a stronger lock to the door, which was installed. The entire premises was being guarded by the Secret Service. Why would they need a lock? But anyway, they put it on. And then the FBI came and broke the lock off. This is the gang that can't shoot straight. The affidavit made no mention of the lock. In fact, it showed the Justice Department told Trump lawyer Evan Corcoran in June that Mar-a-Lago was not authorized to store classified information and asked the room be preserved in its condition until further notice, suggesting it was already the subject of an investigation. There is a SCIF in Mar-a-Lago. All presidents have them. They still deal with classified information. Seriously? Now, this is the unredacted version. What kind of gobbledygook is in the unredacted version? Once again, I join major news sources around the world, President Trump himself, to redact only the names of the affidavit and release it. Unless, of course, we believe that it's essential that the FBI stop being the national police force, the national law enforcement agency, and have become the secret police. That's why we have to keep our sources and methods secret. Yeah. If this ever gets to court, this is going to get blown out of the water so fast. I don't even think a judge would hear the case. I think he'd just toss it. If this is the kind of law enforcement, if this is the kind of understanding of the Bill of Rights that the DOJ and the FBI have, this is the reason why entire government agencies get abolished and rebuilt. So forget about Trump. Forget about Hillary. Forget about all this stuff. You know what this comes down to? Let's forget about all the politics. Good God, I hope we can do that fast. Oh my. By the way, Langston asks, how did the documents exit the government facility? The GAO, the Government Accounting Office, packed it all up, put it in boxes, and shipped it to Mar-a-Lago. Not President Trump, the Government Accounting Office, thereby breaking the chain of custody. I'm not defending the indefensible. I'm pointing out the only thing indefensible in this is the affidavit. I assure you, I'm not defending it. Come on, Langston. Langston's 19 years old. He's a college kid. Okay? He's a college kid. He's a good man. You know, I'm sure he's doing just fine. They had no access to SCI materials. Then how did the SCI materials get in there if the GAO didn't put them there? Once again, you can't let your politics overwhelm your logic. You're supposed to be one of the best and brightest. That means you have a pretty good brain. I have no reason to doubt that that's not the case. Use it, Langston. Like I said, get rid of all of the politics. Get rid of all of it. This comes down to one thing and one thing only. That the political bent of the DOJ and the FBI is so twisted out of reality that they give us a choice between the secret police, they give us a choice between that or the Constitution. Which should we choose? Do we want the Constitution of the United States? Or do we want the secret police? Do we want the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution? Or do we want national law enforcement as a political tool? That's what this all comes down to. And forget about Trump. Forget about Hillary. Forget about all of it. Because what we've decided and what we've determined here is that the FBI is political. It is a political tool. If it's working to your benefit, it's a political tool. If it's working to your demise, it's a political weapon. The key word in all that is political. And we've got to get away from that in this country as fast as we can go. As fast as we can go. And says it too. A real judge would have tossed this junk. That's right. A real federal judge would have been compelled to toss this entire idea. Would have been compelled by the Constitution of the United States. That's why they went to a federal magistrate. And everybody keeps saying he's a magistrate judge or he's a federal judge. No, he's a federal magistrate. Why did they go to him? Well, because he had the horsepower to be able to pull it off against a regular citizen on a minor problem. But they didn't want, that's not the case here. This is a former president and a magistrate is signing off on this. Now, again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I think conspiracy theory is worthless. Okay? But I can say this. I mean, just between you and me and the 6 other people watching, I have to point out that Bruce Reinhart did defend a whole bunch of people in the Jeffrey Epstein circle. You don't suppose that maybe the people that went magistrate shopping for Bruce Reinhart didn't sort of hold that over his head, do you? Now, I'm not asking this because I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm not asking this because I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm asking this because the DOJ and the FBI have proven to be willing to alter evidence, lie to the court, and they have proven that they are political. I have to ask that question. I have to point out the break in the chain of custody of the papers because they were not packed up by President Trump or his staff. They were packed up by the GAO. Those are civil servants. I have to point out the miscreancy involved in all of this evidence tampering and judicial gobbledygook. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817. I forgot to tell you the telephone number. You know, it rings right here. Operator is standing by. It's true. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Let's go. What do you think? Okay. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for being a part of this. Let me get through a bunch of other information. The DOJ has pointed out that they've gone through all the materials and they found what they call a limited set of privileged information. That's none of their business. Privileged information that even they recognize as privileged information shouldn't have been taken in the first place. And what it does is it gives them a look at materials that they should have never seen in the first place because it's privileged information. Attorney-client privilege. That's been ruptured. That's a problem. Okay, that's thing number one. And they say, oh, by the way, well, there's some privilege. Oh, yeah, okay. And then there's this. This just pointed out, this is today's news. A federal judge over the weekend, I'm sorry, this was over the weekend. I thought it was today's news. Announced her preliminary intent to appoint a special master to review records seized by the FBI. This is going to be a problem too for the DOJ and the FBI. They are going to argue vehemently not to let this happen. But it is something that needs to happen, and I'll tell you why. Because the DOJ, already willing to alter evidence and leak information to the press, now, theoretically, is the only source of these documents. And just like the January 6th committee, they can cherry pick whatever they want to try to control the narrative of what was happening with this Mar-a-Lago raid for two reasons. One, political. They're trying to damage President Trump for future political endeavors. And two, they're trying to cover their butts. If a special master is appointed by this federal judge, and I can see no reason why she wouldn't, and oh, by the way, neither can she, then that would give an independent source access to the same material the FBI has and the DOJ, guaranteeing the fact that if there is indeed exculpatory information in any of this stuff, it will be released to you and me. So this judge is right on track. She has a preliminary intent to appoint a special master to review records seized by the FBI during its unprecedented raid of the former president's Mar-a-Lago home at the request of former President Donald Trump and his legal team. Trump and his legal team filed a motion Monday seeking, I guess that's today, seeking an independent review of the records seized by, that was last Monday, seeking the records received by the FBI during its raid of Mar-a-Lago, saying the decision to search his private residence just months before the 2022 midterm elections involved political calculations aimed at diminishing the leading voice in the Republican Party, President Trump. A bit self-serving. U.S. District Judge from the Southern District of Florida, Judge Eileen Cannon, said that the decision was made upon review of President Trump's submissions and the exceptional circumstances presented. Quote, pursuant to Rule 53B, Section 1 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure and the court's inherent authority, and without prejudice to the parties' objections, the court hereby provides notice of its preliminary intent to appoint a special master in this case. Unquote. A hearing is set for September 1st, which I guess would be day after tomorrow, Wednesday, right? In West Palm Beach, Florida. Cannon also ordered the Justice Department to file a response by tomorrow and provide under seal a more detailed receipt for property specifying all property seized pursuant to the search warrant executed on August 8th, 2022. The current property receipts shows the FBI took approximately 20 boxes. That number keeps changing. 20 boxes of items from the present premises, including one set of documents marked as various classified TS-SCI documents. Boy, they're really working hard at protecting the classified documents. I mean, they're in a box that says, oh, TS classified TS-SCI documents. They're really trying to obstruct the FBI. Wow. Listen, they have to appoint a special master in this case. They simply have to. Because as the DOJ has proven, regrettably, they're a political tool. As the FBI has proven, regrettably, the FBI is a political tool. And what they're doing, the politicians involved in all of this, are taking us down the road to turn the FBI from a federal law enforcement agency into the secret police. And it doesn't stop there. What happens is the Biden administration then morphs from being an administration to a regime. Because regimes have secret police. Now, sooner or later, people are going to say, gosh, you know what? This game of chicken is getting out of control. Yeah. Yeah, this game of chicken is getting out of control. Now you're putting the DOJ and the FBI against the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. Yes, you can protect sources and methods and witness identities with redactions to an affidavit, but you can also cover up a political bent to an unprecedented raid. Which do you think is in play here? I'm not telling you what to think, I'm just asking. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more next hour. Make sure you stick with this show. It's a good one. Back with more in a moment. All right, beloveds. I'll be right back after this technical break. Okay? Just saying. Coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Did I forget north to south? North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. What is the Wells Report? You know, there's something like 2 million podcasts out there. This is one of them. Why would you watch it? Why would you have anything to do with it? Well, because this is where you can get the real news. We get the real news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary. I differentiate between my opinion and my news reporting. Nobody else does that. That's one of the reasons why you should watch this show. I'm just bringing you the news. Okay, I don't care whose political ox gets gored. I don't care. There is a bias on the broadcast. We are biased toward the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights, and the Federalist. And if you happen to be someone who, say, for example, is on a more left-leaning side of the political spectrum in the United States, I think you need to review your ideas and what your particular friends, both professional friends and non-professional friends, are trying to do with the Constitution, because it looks an awful lot like your group is trying to turn your back on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. That's kind of un-American. The really inescapable, difficult kind of un-Americanism. And you just have to realize what road you're going down. Last hour, we were discussing the DOJ and the FBI and this comedy of a redacted affidavit regarding the raid on Mar-a-Lago. By the way, it was a pretty good hour. You ought to look it over. And you will be able to do that at patreon.com/The Wells Report. patreon.com/The Wells Report. While you're there, you might want to toss us a couple of bucks. You can subscribe. $1, $2, $5 a month. It's not that big a deal. No, well, it could be. I mean, you know, when I ask for funding on this broadcast, the horrifiedometer goes all the way to the limit. Yeah, because it's hard for me to do this. I've been doing this on the radio for over 20 years, and you don't pay for radio. It's hard for me to try to think that maybe this broadcast is worth paying for. I mean, from a standpoint of you. The company that takes my content and so on and so forth, by golly, they can pay for it. They absolutely can. Okay? Let's see. Oh, yeah, there is some information coming out of Iraq. Things are getting a little bit crazy over there. We're going to have that for you coming up a little bit later on this this broadcast. So make sure you stick around with us for a while. Let's get back to business. I hate politics. This broadcast is not supposed to be about politics. This broadcast is supposed to be the news. Remember back in olden times when you could turn on the news and you would get the news? Now you turn on the news and you get drivel, you get propaganda, you get bias. And what we try to do here is we try to de-propagandize the news. I'm about to give you some more propagandized news. And strangely enough, this is from Fox News. They're biased too. Okay? Here's the headline. Student loan handout reaction. People, quote, are getting rewarded for doing the least amount, unquote. If that's your headline, what follows is biased, which is why I'm pointing it out. Remember the analysis for fact and bias? I'm pointing that out. Reacting to the new Biden administration student loan handout plan, which has elicited an array of comments, one New Jersey human resources professional who paid off over $30,000 of student loan debt by scrimping and saving for years, told Fox News, a loan is a loan. Quote, I didn't count on the government or anybody else to pay that money back for me, unquote. President Biden last week announced a student loan handout program that essentially will use taxpayer money. It's not essentially. It will. There's no other source of money. To pay up to $10,000 of student loan debt per borrower for those making less than $125,000 a year. The plan will cancel up to $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients, too. Okay, so let me see if I got this straight. It's not a loan, it's a Pell Grant. You got money for a Pell Grant, and now we're going to give you 20 grand, what, to cover the cost of administrating the Pell Grant money that you got? The total cost of the loan handouts will amount to $500 billion. This, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. It depends on who you talk to. The Wharton Business School in Philly says this could cost over $1 trillion. Why do I bring that up? Well, because when they were saying it would cost $300 billion, that amounted to $2,079 for every taxpayer in your household. We have 3 taxpayers in our household. That's over $6,000. So if, by the way, $6,000 of our tax money, if, by the way, it's $500 billion, now we're closing in on $12,000. $12,000 of our money being used for all of this, and that's for every taxpayer in the United States. About 165 million of us. The nation's federal student debt now tops $1.6 trillion. This has ballooned for years. The national debt, according to the Treasury Department, is currently $30.7 trillion, which does not include the nearly $1 trillion of spending that the president authorized last week or 2 weeks ago. $30.7 trillion. And by the way, someone pointed something out today that was really, really good. It was on Fox News. It was really good. You know, if people are having trouble paying back these college loans, why is that? Why is it that they're having trouble paying back the college loans? I mean, they're college educated. They should be making money, right? They're not. Why aren't they making money? Maybe it's because the education is useless? Oops. I thought that was a really good point. Do you think that's real or not? I'm just asking. Okay. Moving on. I am no economics or financial person. I'm a public citizen. Alessandra, by the way, she works in a human resources office in New Jersey. This is the person who's saying a loan is a loan. In my view, a loan is a loan, she says. Once she took on student loan debt, she said, quote, "It was my financial responsibility to pay that money back. That's how I looked at it," unquote. She added, quote, "I didn't count on the government or anybody else to pay that money back for me. It was my personal responsibility, my financial responsibility to pay it off," unquote. And I did what I had to do to pay it off. So did Susan and I. Susan and I paid $30,000. She was in her 30s when we paid $30,000 for her education, which took her all the way through a master's degree, which, by the way, she got a degree that actually mattered. Okay, she got health informatics. That was her master's. And she also got a business and health information degree from a Jesuit university. You can say what you want to about the Jesuits, but if you go to a Jesuit university, guess what you get when you drive out of the parking lot for the last time? A diploma that means something. And by the way, this Jesuit university didn't charge Susan $100,000 for her undergrad degree. Just saying, okay? So when you're thinking about sending your kid to college and you're thinking about going down this road, a couple of different things. First of all, this money is far from being paid out in the first place because there are legal problems with this. This is $1 trillion bill. That means the Congress needed to be involved. Why isn't the Congress suing to stop this mess, stop this crazy thing? Don't know. Don't have any idea. So, by the way, in case you're wondering what Alessandra did to pay back the loan, she lived at home with her family after she graduated from college and began full-time work. She's still living at home. Honestly, it looks to me like after I did the responsible thing and worked hard to pay that money off, Today, people are getting rewarded for doing the least amount of work. She explained that she wasn't paying the minimum amount for her loan repayments. I was paying way over the minimum amount. I saw the what the interest rates were. I did a breakdown. She was determined to pay down her debt as quickly as possible. Hello? Again, is a loan is a loan no matter what it is. You pay that back. So, blowback all over the country on this student loan thing. What's the White House saying? Well, Fox News points out it's day 6. The White House refuses to say who will pay for Biden's $500 billion student loan handout. It's amazing. It's been a week and it's gone from $300 billion to $500 billion. Gosh almighty. President Biden still has not explained how he plans to pay for the cancellation of thousands of dollars of debt for each student loan borrower, which could cost taxpayers upwards of $500 billion. Despite unveiling the policy last week, administration officials have yet to clarify how the proposal will be paid for in the long term. Since the current plan calls for the government to forgive the debt, that means taxpayers are on the hook for most of the principal. By the way, I mentioned the 1.6 trillion in student loan debt, 1.7 trillion in student loan debt. 90% of that are federal loans. Federal loans. That means we are the loaning party. So basically, it's a 1.7 billion dollar government spending bill. We just spent 1.92 billion dollars for supposed COVID relief. So we just spent $1.9 trillion. And guess what happened? No, it wasn't billion, it was trillion. $1.9 trillion. Okay, so now we're in a situation where we're going, what happened to inflation when that happened? Oh no. And so once again, $1.7 trillion worth of federal debt. What's going to happen with inflation? Oh no, oh no. In other words, oh no, the sequel. Fox News has reached out to the White House multiple times inquiring how the Biden administration plans to pay for the student loan handout or whether it was eyeing future tax hikes to pay for it. Over the weekend, a spokesperson responded by pointing to comments Friday by Bharat Ramamurthy, deputy director of the National Economic Council, who claimed the plan is fully paid for through deficit reduction. Deficit reduction. Deficit reduction? Does he mean national debt reduction? No, deficit. It's paid for and far more by the amount of deficit reduction that we're already on track to do this year. Like I said, we're on track for $1.7 trillion in federal deficit reduction this year. So we're basically what we're doing, if we've got this deficit reduction, and we have $1.7 trillion in student loan debt, and 90% of that is federal loan debt, then we just spent the entire deficit reduction that the president is taking credit for. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm getting my billions and millions and trillions mixed up. It's hard to keep track. You're listening to the Wells Report. Back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us today. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. You can find us on chat, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook. So hang out with us because we bring the real news. The real news. So on this broadcast, I spent a lot of time talking about the dividers. The old axiom of warfare is to divide, then conquer. That's essentially how the Union won the Civil War. They split the South in half. And these dividers have been splitting us in half as fast as they possibly can. We need to start ignoring them. Okay? We do. We need to start ignoring them, and here's why. Let's discuss Governor Kathy Hochul. This from Fox News. She has sparked intense outrage again after lambasting New York Republican candidates during a speech last week, telling them to get out of town and head to Florida where they belong. The outrage simmered across social media early today, with Twitter users slamming the New York governor for an intolerant angle and accusing her of isolating all Republicans living in the Empire State. Quote, "We're here to say that the era of Trump and Zeldin and Molinaro, just jump on a bus and head down to Florida where you belong, get out of town. You don't represent our values." Now remember, these people like to say that Republicans are trying to destroy democracy, when really what they're doing is they're destroying democracy, which is different. Though Hochul later doubled down on her comments, claimed that they were meant for gubernatorial challenger Representative Lee Zeldin and her political allies, former President Donald Trump and congressional candidate Mark Molinaro, Republicans across the spectrum took exception. Hochul is flat out attacking not just GOP politicians, but GOP voters. Normal behavior for the Democrat Party now. Vermont Republicans ripped Hochul, arguing that governments would normally invite people into their state instead of requesting they move away. They also extended the invitation for New York Republicans to make the move to the Green Mountain State. While we're at that, here's a list of places you can go. I've lived in a lot of these places: Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, not Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, South Carolina, Georgia. Let's see, Virginia, West Virginia. Okay. Let's see, Ohio. And I think I already said Iowa. Let's see, there's Vermont and New Hampshire, and also Massachusetts. Okay, so those are the places you can go. There are 28 Republican states. See, I got to be perfectly honest with you. One of my all-time best friends is Gary Olivier. He moved from New York. He said he was tired of living in a communist state. And so he came to Texas. Did I mention Texas? We're on the list. But do me a favor. When you move out of New York, leave your politics there. But do exactly what Governor Hochul is telling you to do. Get out of New York. Get out of New York. It's exactly what happened to California. Get out of New York. Get out of California. Get out of Washington State. Get out of Nevada. I got out of Nevada. Get out of Oregon. Get out of Washington State, like I said. Get out of these states. Why? Well, because when you leave, they will lose U.S. government influence. They'll lose representatives, which they should do in droves. Because we live in America, Jack. We don't live in your strange idea of what everybody's real values are, Governor Hochul. What a jerk. This is the Wells Report. You're listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. So I'm saying that Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, says, Republicans not needed here, go away. She was actually talking to Republican candidates, but it got morphed because it came out of Fox News. It's biased. It got morphed into, well, you just don't want any Republicans here. And I am telling you that if you're a Republican living in New York, you should do exactly what Governor Hochul is being accused of doing. You should pick up your stuff and move away. You should move out of there. There are 28 states that have Republican governors. About 25 of them have Republican governors, and they're still not being twisted into some sort of communist bent by people that are pretending that they're Republican governors, okay? One of them is Texas. And I pointed out, Texas. And I also pointed out Alabama or Mississippi. Alan Schaefer, who, by the way, is a Democrat and listens to this broadcast. By the way, great to see Alan. Hope you had a great weekend. He says, your life has hit rock bottom if you're either considering moving to Alabama or Mississippi. Ooh. Oh, dude. I actually wrote back on the chat room. I said, Alan, wow. Yeah. Then Gary said, Texas is closed. Turn around. Uh-huh. Yeah. Good God. Alabama Poker says Alabama and Mississippi have plenty of good features. I'd rather live in one of those states than New York, California, or any other number of leftist states. Well, true. Absolutely true. All right, let's get on with it here. Wait a minute. Let me go back here and say something. When the subject of gun violence comes up, I point out states with restrictive gun laws, which means to the criminals living in those states, they really don't have to worry about blowing somebody away, because chances are not real good that anybody's going to pick up a pistol or what have you and finish your life, the good guy with a gun scenario. And I also point out that Texas is a place where we just don't deal with that stuff. Well, yesterday, we had to deal with that stuff. A 17-year-old boy and a 5-year-old boy were identified as people who died in a weekend drive-by shooting in northwest Fort Worth, pretty close to where I live. A toddler was also injured. Fort Worth police have not yet reported any arrests in the shooting. The 5-year-old boy was identified as Rayshard Scott, who died at 3:32 p.m. Sunday in Cook's Children's Medical Center. This according to the Medical Examiner website. He died in the emergency room. Jamarian Monroe was pronounced dead at 3:14 p.m. Sunday at John Peter Smith Hospital. An 18-month-old boy suffered minor injuries expected to survive, according to Fort Worth Police Chief Neil Noakes at a news conference near the scene. Noakes said police were not certain of the relationships of those who were shot and do not know what they were doing outside at the time that they were shot, probably playing. The shooting occurred at 2:15 Sunday in the 8500 block of Steel Dust Drive near the intersection of Barber Ridge Trail. Those who were shot were outside the house when assailants arrived in a vehicle and opened fire. Multiple cartridge casings were found on the street. We're seeing violent crime on the rise across the country, and unfortunately, we're seeing violent crime here in Fort Worth in numbers we don't want to see, said Noakes. When you have children who are murdered completely senselessly, he said, it adds another level to that tragedy we're all experiencing. And then, looking steely-eyed at the camera, he said this, I can tell you this much. The Fort Worth Police Department is going to put every resource necessary to this investigation to do everything we can to bring those responsible to justice as soon as possible. All I can say is someone knows who those shooters are. You need to drop a dime. That's an old expression. Pull the phone out of your pocket. Call the Fort Worth police. Here's the number: 817 392 4336. 817 392 4336. If you have information on that, reference this report number: 2200-68041. You've had time to get a pencil and a piece of paper. Let me give you those numbers again. If you have any information on this drive-by shooting that claimed 2 lives and injuries to an infant, call 817-392-4336. 817-392-4336. Reference report number 2200-68041. We don't put up with this in Texas. We're going to find these guys. They're going to be arrested. They're not going to get no cash bail here. They're going to get tried. And if they're found guilty, they might just go to the head of the line at the death house in Huntsville, Texas. It might just happen. Elsewhere, 2 people were shot and killed. A third was wounded in a shopping center in Bend, Oregon. This prompted law enforcement agencies to flood the area, enter a grocery store where officers found the gunman dead from a gunshot wound. Officers still investigating the motive. They did not release the name of the victims or the gunman. Lisa Goodman, spokeswoman for St. Charles Hospital in Bend, Oregon, said one injured person had been admitted there. The individual's condition was good. The shooting began at 7 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time in the parking lot at the Forum Shopping Center in Bend, Oregon, 160 miles southeast of Portland. The authorities said one witness told them there may have been a second shooter, but Chief Mike Krantz of the Bend Police Department said during a news conference that officers had not found any evidence of a second shooter or additional gunfire in the area. The gunman began shooting in the parking lot, then entered a Safeway grocery store, where he shot and killed one person near the front door. He continued walking through the store, firing multiple rounds. The gunman then fatally shot another person inside the store. When police officers entered the store, they found the gunman dead, as well as the AR-15 style rifle and a shotgun near him. Police officers did not shoot the gunman. So either somebody else did, and because it's Oregon, just walked away, because you can get into legal trouble, more legal trouble than the criminals in Oregon, when you are trying to defend people from getting shot. Or he took himself out. We'll see. The shooting came a little more than 3 months after a gunman armed with an assault-style weapon killed 10 people and wounded 3 others in a Tops supermarket in Buffalo, New York. So, when you go to the grocery store, you take your shopping list, you take your shopping bags, and you take your gun. And somebody walks into the grocery store and starts shooting. Make sure that your family's safe. Your wife, Susan, and I go shopping all the time together. It's one of the things we like to do. We like stomping around the grocery store and hanging out with each other. Make sure your family, your significant other, your spouse is safe. Then clear leather. Listen carefully, determine the location of the shooter, hold it low ready, close distance, and when you get a good shot with nobody behind you, behind the shooter, when you get a good shot, blow him to Mars. But don't leave. Reholster your weapon, stand there and wait for the police to come. And if, by the way, you happen to know somebody that happens to be bragging about how they made their bones a few days ago in North Fort Worth, call the cops. Call the cops. We're not going to put up with that here. And you shouldn't put up with it there. Nobody should put up with it. Everybody's sitting around talking about how 9 or 10 people were shot in a grocery store in Buffalo, New York. Just this weekend, 35 people were shot, 9 killed in Chicago over the weekend. 8 people killed, 25 wounded, including a 5-year-old boy in shootings over the weekend in Chicago. 5-year-old and a man were shot in Rogers Park on the north side. The man, 25 years old, was driving in the 7600 block of North Paulina Street when another car pulled up. Someone fired shots. The boy was hit in the head, taken in critical condition to Lurie Children's Hospital. The man suffered gunshot wounds to the hand and shoulder. He drove himself to St. Francis Hospital. He's in good condition. A woman killed, a man wounded outside the Morgan Park District Police Station. 2 were in a car in the South Vincennes Avenue near Monterey Avenue when a gray Chrysler began chasing them. Someone inside fired several shots. The driver, a 42-year-old man, attempted to get away, drove toward the police station. He made it to the Sally port of the station when the other car pulled up and someone fired several more rounds. The man was taken in serious condition to Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn. The woman was shot in the head, taken to the same hospital where she was pronounced dead. The tide is beginning to turn. Fox News is reporting that there are people who are even Democrats in Illinois saying something has to be done. Democrat State Representative LaShawn K. Ford is pleading with Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot and Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx to get tougher on crime. Ford, who represents Chicago's West Side in the state assembly, shared his concerns after another bloody weekend left 9 people dead and over 30 injured. Too many babies have been killed. Too many fathers have been killed. Too many mothers have been killed. Too many brothers have been killed. This has to stop. And the only way you stop it is you have a system in place that's going after criminals, not law-abiding gun owners. We cannot allow them to continue to run our communities and make our lives less safe. So only a few of them, we could get them. Once we eliminate criminals off the street, people will live in peace. We can do it. We know where they are. Ford said top prosecutor Kim Foxx has a responsibility to pull together the justice system, send the message that if you murder somebody, you're going to get locked up. The lawmaker didn't hold back on his criticism of liberal Mayor Lori Lightfoot. The criminals are winning in Chicago. I think she's failed because she lost the trust of law enforcement. She doesn't have a working relationship with Kim Foxx. She doesn't have a working relationship with Chief Judge of the Cook County Circuit Court, Timothy Evans. That's a problem. The community sees that. Criminals see it. They know they can get away with murder. When you got Illinois Democrats calling out Illinois Democrats because of violence in the streets, you know the tide's beginning to turn, finally, at long last. Until then, you have to arm yourself. You have to arm yourself. You have to train yourself. And you have to keep doing it. Because I can assure you from personal experience that tactical handgun skills are perishable. I train once a month. Last time I trained, weekend or two ago, I was shooting and moving. I made a really, really good shot. And then I made a really, really bad shot. And that means you got to practice and practice and practice and practice some more. Yeah, okay, Langston, whatever you say. You're listening to The Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Waiting for you to give us a call. Would love to hear from you when you get a moment. By the way, support this broadcast. Hit that little bell that's up there so that you know when we're going on the air. Subscribe to the broadcast, especially if you're on Facebook or YouTube. Subscribe. Share the broadcast with people you think might find value in it. And yes, if you'd like to support the show, go to patreon.com. Back with more in just a moment. You are listening to The Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817. Yes, 817-379-2172. I just got a nasty surprise from the Washington Post. They wanted me to sign in, so stupidly I decided to do it. And I want to quote from the article in the Washington Post. Let me turn that over here. Yeah. Anyway, I want to quote from this article. Good. That was easy. Okay, so we were just talking about people moving out of red states. There are other people and other companies moving out of red states. They're losing businesses hand over fist. Smith & Wesson CEO Mark Smith was fed up. He was running the largest firearms manufacturer in America, based in Springfield, Massachusetts. Been making weapons there since 1860. And so what ended up happening is that Smith announced last September Smith & Wesson was moving to Tennessee. 20 firearms. Deciding to leave was extremely difficult, Smith told investors, but we feel we are left with no other alternative. At least 20 firearms, ammunition, and gun accessory companies, including some of the industry's biggest names, Beretta, Remington, have moved headquarters or shifted production from traditionally Democrat states to Republican states over the past decade, relocating thousands of jobs, hundreds of millions of dollars in investment amid the nation's sharpening divide over guns. The companies were enticed by tax breaks and the promises of cheaper labor, but the biggest factor was the push for stricter gun laws in Democrat-leaning states. They're going where they're wanted, said John Harris, a Nashville attorney and executive director of the Tennessee Firearms Association. The result is a firearms industry that is increasingly rooted in the South, to a lesser extent the West, weakening ties to the Northeast that stretch back to the American Revolution. The dramatic shift illustrates the economic fallout from political polarization in the states, where laws and attitudes increasingly diverge on cultural issues. It also reveals a growing frustration among some left-leaning lawmakers with homegrown industries they see as unwilling to even discuss gun violence. It's not gun violence they're not willing to discuss. It's violations of the Second Amendment that they're unwilling to discuss. This is pitiful. It's absolutely pitiful. And these people are getting what they deserve, or in this case, losing what they deserve. Look, this is anti-American activity. And it's as simple as that. It's un-American activity, and I'll tell you why. Because if you believe in infringing on the Second Amendment of the United States, you're un-American. You cannot legislate or put a lien on an unalienable right. It's not inalienable, it's unalienable. You cannot legislate around the Second Amendment. It's un-American. It's simply un-American. I don't know how to make it any more clear. And I told you at the outset of this broadcast last hour, I told you that there is a bias on this broadcast. We are biased by the Declaration of Independence, by the Constitution, by the Bill of Rights, by the Federalist, the group of essays that explained it all. We are biased that direction, like most Americans, if not all Americans, should be. Those documents gave birth to the greatest nation in the history of the human endeavor, ever. And there is no reason for a bunch of leftist crazy people to take any of it away from us. There's no reason except an insatiable thirst for power. And that's all there is. And it's awful. So I say that this show is biased. And the thing about it is this, is that these people, these gun manufacturers, are proving my point that this is un-American activity. And they're leaving. It's gotten so bad, the governor of New York actually invited Republicans in her state to leave. So leave. Don't look back. Because sooner or later, they're just going to be a whole bunch of leftist crazy people sitting in those states saying, see, we're right. By the way, Bill, it's your turn to empty the garbage. Go get the garbage truck. What? There's no fuel? Well, let's get a Let's get an electric garbage truck. What? Well, that's right. We don't have the tax base to pay for it any longer. Why? Because everybody moved out. Oh, yeah. Yeah, everybody got tired of getting shot. Besides, the garbage truck is full of bullet holes anyway because we defunded the police. That's what's ahead of these states. And I think Kathy Hochul is exactly right. Move away from New York. Get away. Get away. Okay? Just get away. You're listening to the Wells Report. We'll be back with more next hour on this broadcast. Make sure you join us then. Hey, listen, folks, thanks for being here. Okay? We'll be back with the next hour of the Wells Report in just a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Why should you watch this broadcast? In my humble opinion, and by the way, I do differentiate between news and humble opinions. We provide you news, real news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We make commentary. Again, that's opinion, not the news. That's not the news. We debate the news, the analysis, the bias, the facts, and the commentary. We do that every single day for 3 hours every day from 2 until 5 live in the Central Time Zone. And I want you to be with us. I want you to join us. I want you to share this with your friends. If you think this is valuable in any way, tell your friends about us because we would love to have you. You can chat with us by going to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. You can call me on the telephone at 817-379-2172. What did I do today? I got up really, really early, and I turned on live coverage of the attempt to launch Artemis 1, which is a test flight. A test flight of the Space Launch System carrying the Orion capsule, which is going to embark when it is launched, because it didn't happen today. It's going to embark on a 6-week mission to the moon. It's an amazing flight. And what they're going to do is, it's really fantastic. I'll share some of the technical details with you on this mission. It's really amazing. But what we're going to do is go back to the moon. It's only been half a century. It's ridiculous. 31 point something or no, it's actually $30.7 trillion in national debt. And we don't have flags on the moon. We don't have an installation on the moon. We don't have flags on Mars. We spent $31 trillion. The Apollo program, the entire program cost $100 billion. $100 billion. President Biden spent $1 trillion 2 weeks ago. And we don't have flags on the moon. We don't have an installation. We don't have flags on Mars, and we don't have an installation on the moon. Where's that money going? Anyway, the Artemis 1 mission was scheduled to launch this morning. I'm going to take the Orion capsule with 3 test dummies. No, stop it. Just stop it. Okay, no, President Biden is not on the crew. Okay, will you stop that? That was humor. Anyway, it will be, test dummies are going to go there. They're fully instrumented, so we'll get an idea of what a crew would feel on an operational mission, which will happen later. The next test flight window is Friday. It's about a 2-hour window. Now, those windows change because of the amazing flight profile of this thing. Friday is definitely in play, said mission manager Mike Serafin. We need to get a little bit of time to look at the data. The team is setting up for a 96-hour recycle. Serafin said the signs don't point to a problem with the RD-25 engine. It was engine number 3. But rather, it is with a bleed system that keeps the engines at proper operating temperature. He also revealed the weather concerns during the window for the time of launch were also part of the decision to scrub. See, once they started, working with the weather situation, they started eating into their 2-hour window. And then when they had this bleed problem, which didn't keep the engine, the RD-25 engine number 3, at the proper temperature, they just realized they were running out of time. Quote, we would have been a no-go for weather at the beginning of the window due to precipitation. Later on in the window, we would have had a no-go for lightning within the launch pad area. This will be the first flight in NASA's Artemis project, a quest to put astronauts back on the moon for the first time since the Apollo program ended 50 years ago. The timeline for returning to the moon is sometime after 2025. The first test mission involves a round trip that will take 42 days. How cool. By the way, in case you're wondering on that lightning deal, that was a lesson we learned from Apollo 12. Apollo 12 got hit by lightning twice. Twice. One of the most brilliant calls in the history of the Apollo program was SCE to AUX, because for all intents and purposes, the Apollo 12 capsule shut down. There was no data. They were riding a rocket, which, by the way, was not affected. There's an instrument ring. There was an instrument ring in the Saturn V. They basically flew the rocket independent of what happened in the capsule or what happened on ground control. It was amazing. And that's the only reason why the mission wasn't a spectacular failure on launch. It got hit by lightning twice. So lightning is a big deal. And they put lightning arresting systems all around the launch pads. There are 3 of them. They're the large towers with the white objects on top of them. They look a lot like the launch escape system, but they suck up lightning. And so that being said, they're still not going to launch, because once the rocket leaves that pad, actually the exhaust plume creates a conductor for lightning to hit the rocket. It's amazing. Amid the disappointment for the delay, when Vice President Kamala Harris was in attendance, you know why Vice President Kamala Harris was in attendance for the launch? Because it's not anywhere close to the southern border. That was humor too. Bill Nelson, the NASA administrator, put the decision in perspective, noting the spaceflight was scrubbed 4 times. His space flight was scrubbed 4 times before he became the second member of Congress to reach Earth orbit in 1985. Scrubs are part of the program, especially on test flights. This is a test flight. They're testing the entire stack. They send the entire rocket up together. You know, there's a lot of independent testing and so on and so on. There is, of all the stages and the various equipment. But sooner or later, you got to put the thing together and you got to fly it. And that's what they're doing here. A lot of people were talking earlier this morning on the live chat that I was a part of. And they were talking about how, wait a minute, why didn't we just dust off the old Saturn V system and use that? Not a necessarily bad idea, except for a couple of different reasons. First of all, the Space Launch System, and certainly the Orion capsule, are generations beyond the Saturn V. Also, the people that put the Saturn V together and worked it all out, including the NASA flight controllers, the one that made the SCE to AUX call, they've all retired. They've all retired. A lot of them are gone. And so consequently, yeah, I suppose you could put together another Saturn V. It's a perfectly fine system. But then you'd have to go back through the problems that all those guys already solved, because they're not there to help you with that. So that's one of the problems. That's one of the problems. You know, we have perfectly capable fighter jets that sit in the desert in Arizona, Tucson, in fact. And the reason that they don't fly and probably never will again is because, once again, everybody that took care of them all retired. And then the people who made parts for them all retired, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So scrubs are indeed part of the program. Jim Free, the NASA Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems and Development, cited the advice that Deputy Administrator Pamela Melroy shared with her family when they were coming to watch their own spaceflight take off. Plan a week trip for Florida for the vacation, and you might see a launch. NASA struggled to fuel the rocket with nearly 1 million gallons of hydrogen and oxygen because of a leak of highly explosive hydrogen, a problem that flared up during testing last spring. The massive Space Launch System rocket will become the agency's most powerful rocket system when it ultimately takes flight. The top priority will be testing the Orion capsule's new heat shield as it re-enters Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles an hour. The Apollo spacecraft entered at about 21,000. The capsule will have to survive the fiery descent during the process, will likely become one of the fastest re-entries to date. It will be the fastest re-entry to date. For her part, Vice President Kamala Harris was among the thousands who gathered in Florida for the launch. She remained upbeat after the decision was made to postpone. While we hope to see the launch of Artemis 1 today, the attempt provided valuable data as they test the most powerful rocket in history. Our commitment to the Artemis program remains firm. We'll return to the moon. The postponement was a disappointment to thousands of people who jammed the Florida coastline to see the launch. Launch commentator Daryl Nail said the engineers were analyzing the issues. We must wait to see what shakes out from the test data before announcing a new launch date and time. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson said delays are part of the space business, particularly when dealing with machines as complicated as Artemis 1. That was from USA Today. Fox News, actually Fox Business News, reported it this way. The scheduled launch of Artemis 1, the moon rocket, was scrubbed on Monday, NASA officials announced, before later vowing it was not going to fly until it's ready. The rocket was set to lift off on a mission to put a crew capsule with 3 test dummies into orbit around the moon. The decision to call off the launch comes after crews working on the project encountered an issue chilling down an engine number 3, amongst other factors, weather, which is pretty good. When you start thinking about this, you got the entire system up there and it's drinking fuel and it's getting all set up and the whole thing is ready to go. You just don't light the candle until it's ready. You just don't. We need the engine to be at the cryogenically cool temperature such that when it starts, it's not shocked with the cold fuel that flows through it. So we need a little extra time to assess that. When the system started working, or when the team started working through, they also saw an issue with a vent valve in the inner tank. So the combination of not being able to get the engine 3 chilled down, the vent valve issue that they saw the inner tank really caused this to pause today. We feel like we needed a little more time. There's also a series of weather issues throughout the window. Next launch attempt will not be until midday on Friday at the earliest. But Serafin suggested the crew working on the mission needed time to assess where things stand. We're going to give the team time to rest, first of all, and then come back fresh tomorrow and reassess what we learned today, and then develop a series of options. It's still too early to say what the options are. And then we'll come back and talk about where we stand tomorrow evening. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about this mission. It is a test mission. There were significant issues having to do with the Apollo all-up test system. That's when they put everything together and tested it at once. That's the first time they did that with the Apollo project. Apollo 4 was the first flying rocket system. When that big mother left the pad, it sort of sashayed towards the gantry. That's that large tower beside it, and missed it by, something like 25 feet? The astronauts were always rather curious as to whether or not the rocket was going to hit that gantry on the way up. It never did. Apollo 6 lost 2 main engines in the first stage and still managed to make orbit. So this is a test. It's going to be a while before there are live human beings. Until this is man-rated, they're not going to let people risk their lives flying Artemis 1, or in this case, probably be Artemis 4 or 5. That being said, now you know. So it wasn't the engine itself. The RD-25s are pretty good engines. They're really good. As a matter of fact, they're brilliant. They've been uprated. They make more power. But they have to keep them at the right temperature or bad things happen. We don't need that. Back with more in just a moment. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Why am I looking at that camera when I'm over here? Hi, this is the Wells Report. Telephone number 817-379-2172. So, when the Chinese got all bellicose and crazy regarding the idea that they were upset with Nancy Pelosi's, oh no, did that just happen? Okay. All right. Anyway, when the Chinese got all bellicose and crazy about Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, I said that the Teddy Roosevelt should have joined the USS Ronald Reagan on the northeastern side and the southeastern side of Taiwan to remind the People's Liberation Army Navy that they were light years behind the capability of projecting power anywhere on the planet. Okay. And I was sure that the Biden administration didn't have the stones required to make that kind of a decision. I was apparently wrong. This from CNN. After the United States House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, the Chinese military staged some of the biggest ever military exercises around the island. Chinese warplanes swarmed across the Taiwan Strait. The People's Liberation Army even fired missiles over Taiwan, the democratically ruled island that the Chinese Communist Party claims as its sovereign territory despite having never controlled it. Those Chinese military exercises set what some analysts and officials feared might be a new normal across the strait, a more permanent PLA presence, People's Liberation Army presence, ever closer to Taiwan. U.S. officials, meanwhile, vowed Washington would stay the course. Chinese intimidation tactics would be challenged. That was something I was sure they weren't going to do anything with. But then again, like I said, I might be wrong. Yesterday, the U.S. Navy sent 2 guided missile cruisers through the straits. China, the People's Republic of China, the PRC, claims the Taiwan Strait as its internal waters. The U.S. and others maintain the strait as international waters under the United Nations Convention of the Laws of the Sea. It was the first time in at least 4 years the U.S. Navy sent 2 cruisers through the straits. Research fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore said one of their professors, a research fellow actually, Colin Coe, he said that the U.S. hadn't been there for a long time. He'd been keeping a database on the transits. Having 2 instead of the usual 1 vessel to do this mission is certainly a bigger signal of protest against not only Beijing's recent military exercises around Taiwan, but also in response to Beijing's attempt to subvert the legal status of the waterway and longstanding freedom of navigation rights through the area. The U.S. warships made the transit was no surprise. They've made dozens of such voyages in recent years. U.S. officials said transits would continue. What was surprising to analysts was the response from Beijing. So the Speaker of the House of Representatives goes to Taiwan and they freak out. 2 United States guided missile cruisers go through the Taiwan Straits and nothing. Really? Yeah, the Chinese military's Eastern Theater Command said it monitored the ships. They were ready to thwart any provocation. That's the sum total of what came out of the Chinese government. See, no matter what they say, no matter what they do, the United States of America still means something to the Chinese. They made a good call leaving them alone. A good call. So that was instructive. I hope you found that instructive as well. You're listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Stick around. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. So there was some interesting news out of Iraq today. And what ended up happening is what was fascinating to me wasn't necessarily the coverage, was the lack of coverage. Because I suppose we have to go back to politics for the lack of coverage about what's happening in Iraq today. Mainly because, as you know, President Obama pulled us out of Iraq. A lot of us said, including me, that move guaranteed that the United States would be back there at some point. Now, was the president right? Was President Obama, was he correct when he said Osama bin Laden is not in Iraq? He was. But you also got to remember, when we got out of Iraq, that sort of ignited something called the Arab Spring. Remember that? Anyway, he went to Afghanistan, found Osama bin Laden, and Osama bin Laden shortly thereafter attained room temperature. Now, Muqtada al-Sadr has decided to quit. He is the ruling Iraqi Shiite cleric that runs the place. He decided that he was going to resign from politics. The religious leader's political party won more seats in parliament than any other in the October elections, but not enough to have a majority. Resulted in a deadlock. Al-Sadr has refused to work with Iranian rivals. One of the problems of the parliamentarian system, the parliamentary system. It's not the first time al-Sadr said he was leaving politics, leaving some skeptical of this announcement. He's made similar declarations in the past when political developments were not going in his favor. But this elicited a different response. Footage from local television posted on Twitter showed protesters chanting outside the Republican Palace. The breach comes after al-Sadr's supporters stormed the Iraqi parliament building in July. They'd been staging a sit-in outside the building ever since. Some of the other things that are going on, this, by the way, according to Fox News, demonstrators pulled down cement barriers, flooded through the palace gates, making their way to the building's various halls and salons. Images from the scene also showed protesters swimming in the palace pool. Asharq News tweeted that the Iraqi Council of Ministers said they were suspending the sessions of government after protesters stormed their headquarters as well. This has been deadly. There are people who have lost their lives. Accounts also report shooting near the home of former Iraqi Prime Minister Nuri al-Maliki. The Iraqi Joint Operations Command announced a complete curfew in the capital, Baghdad, including vehicles and citizens. This is a statement reported by the Iraqi news agency. The report said the curfew was to begin at 3:30 p.m. local time, although Al Jazeera reported that it would start at 7 p.m. Al-Sadr announced his retirement on social media, ordering party offices to be closed. The move followed the retirement of Shiite leader Ayatollah Qadim al-Hari, who shares supporters with al-Sadr. Al-Hari urged followers to support Iranian leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Okay, that's the Iranian leader. Al-Sadr said al-Hari's decision was not of his own volition, which means that Iran is playing around with Iraq. Like I said, that was from Fox News. This from PJ Media. The Iraqi presidential palace was stormed by angry protesters on Monday, while the U.S. Embassy was evacuated by helicopter in a scene reminiscent of the last days of South Vietnam. Uh-oh. Initial reports are the helicopters were ordered in, the staff ordered out when rioters breached the zone, the green zone. There was also a report that one person had been shot and killed. No clue as to whether they were American staff, or a rioter. That's pretty much all we know so far about the situation at the embassy. This marks the Biden administration's second humiliating bug out from an Islamic country in just over a year. 13 Americans were killed in Kabul during President Joe Biden's botched retreat from Afghanistan on August 17th. Please note that this is a biased report from PJ Media. Untold hundreds of Americans, thousands of our allies remain stranded in Afghanistan. What happens next in Iraq is anyone's guess. Yeah, it sort of looks like January 6th, except those people are carrying weapons. The riots broke out following permanent resignation from politics. We'll see how long it lasts. Of influential Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. Now they have that as he's a Shiite. That's okay. That's correct. For good measure, he previously withdrew his plurality party from parliament as well. The caretaker government of Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi was already weak and essentially powerless. So that's the story. Now, it's not being covered by American news interests. Let me look to see if CNN has anything on their page. Let's see. Funerals. Okay, NASA officials, Ukrainian police. They're talking about Ukraine, but they're not talking about Iraq. This is bigger than just a peaceful protest at a government capital. Okay, this is the real deal. And CNN is still not covering it. Let's see who else isn't covering it. Let's see. USA Today. Let's see if USA Today is covering it. DOJ, GOP, BYU Duke basketball. Let's see. Nothing about Iraq. Huh. They do talk about how Afghan women are coping with fear, but that's the closest they get. Don't know about CBS, NBC, ABC. Don't know that they're not covering it, but like I said, I'm reasonably sure that the reason that they're not talking about what's going on in Iraq is because what has already happened in Iraq and American decision making regarding the Middle East in the last, shall we say, previous to the Trump administration and after the Trump administration. Okay, so there you go. Now, what does that mean to us? Well, it depends on how much the situation deteriorates. If Iraq continues to deteriorate, and if indeed that there is chaos and anarchy in the street, it depends on what the world community is going to do about it. Because Iraq is part of the most volatile area in the entire world. So, what could happen? Well, I'm pretty sure you already know what could happen. What could happen is that things could blow up again. Everybody says, well, the United States isn't the world's policeman. I get it. And I have said that I'm pretty sure the Biden administration wouldn't lift a finger. Although they did put a couple of guided missile cruisers through the Taiwan Straits. Good move. Especially when you consider that the two cruisers were not alone. You just couldn't see the other ships that were escorting them through. Just saying. So what we have here is we have world unrest. Yes, we have troubles in Ukraine. Yes, there are troubles in the Middle East. Yes, there are troubles in the Far East. All of them tracing their lineage back to the election of Joe Biden. In two of those areas, Joe Biden is compromised by his son's business deals. Now, whether those dealings are criminal or not my issue. But there is clear evidence that there is influence being peddled. And indeed, there have been some real circumstances having to do with exchanges of money, both to Ukraine and to China. Some of that money, by the way, was 1 million barrels of petroleum given to a China company whose one of the stockholders happened to be Hunter Biden, out of the strategic petroleum reserves. I don't know how sending 1 million barrels of oil to China is going to help bring down the price of gas. Well, it worked. Price of gas is down. Yeah, but diesel's back over $5 a gallon today. And gasoline is going to shortly follow. And until gasoline is hovering over the 450, 475 mark, nobody in the mainstream media is going to cover it, except maybe Fox News. So, what we have here is we have the direct result, at least in two of these hotspots, where the President of the United States is compromised at some level. Once again, is it criminal? I don't know. But he certainly is compromised at some level. As far as Afghanistan goes, you really don't need me to tell you what happened with President Biden in Afghanistan. And now here we are in Iraq. Like I said, I could understand why President Obama made that decision to leave Iraq in the first place, even though I said at the time that all that was going to do was guarantee that we were going to be back in there very soon. We should have made it a U.S. territory. We should have had Iraq as the 51st state, but then again, that looks an awful lot like empire building, doesn't it? The only thing that I can tell you is that we fought a war in Japan, and we stayed there for 60 years. We fought a war in Germany, and in great measure, we're still there, but not nearly where we were before. It seems to me that there should be a very robust American presence in Iraq. We had a golden opportunity to establish a serious, strategic U.S. presence in the Middle East simply by being a part of Iraqi life. It would have taken a while. It would have taken a while. But Iraq does have assets that Afghanistan does not. And people are saying, well, Afghanistan has all these rare earth minerals. Yeah, but they're encased in endless square miles or cubic miles of granite. Everybody's worried about China going into Afghanistan, getting all these rare earth minerals. Yeah, okay, good luck getting them out. It's one of the reasons why Afghanistan hasn't been mined already, except by landmines. So when you start talking about all this stuff, you start talking about a president that demonstrated serious weakness at a very bad moment in world politics. Vladimir Putin says, don't have to worry about the U.S., goes into Ukraine. China says, this is our chance. In fact, I don't have any idea why China just hasn't invaded Taiwan already. Although, based on their non-response to U.S. guided missile cruisers going through the Taiwan Straits, maybe it's because at some level, somebody in China is realizing that they do not have a big enough dog to take on the United States. And they also know that if they take on Taiwan, the United States would intervene. Maybe. Maybe. But it all comes back. It all comes back to the 2020 election. None of this stuff was being pulled off when President Trump was the president. And let's take President Trump out of it. Let's just say a strong, maybe even borderline aggressive United States government, not afraid to show strength at any level, anywhere. Let's assume that it was just a Republican president that actually understands the role of the United States in the world. That's absent now. And it's because of votes from we, the people of the United States. I know. It's hard to take yourself out of the local newspaper when you're picking a president. But I assure you that it's never been easier to find real news to make decisions on. All you got to do is spend an hour or so with us every day. you'll hear the most important news of the day. I promise. I absolutely promise. But we have to do a better job in the voting booth and at the ballot box. And we have to realize that when we keep hearing about how the Republicans, the actual support for Republicans coming up to the 2022 midterm elections is falling. Yeah, that's propaganda. We'll see how much they fall when ballots start getting counted. Assuming that the elections are okay, but let's not deal with that now, shall we? You're listening to the Wells Report, watching it too. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us today. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. You know the news because you've been listening, right? Or watching. You have, right? It's good. Good for you. So let's talk about something besides politics and besides news and besides all that stuff. Let's talk about the 2022 MTV Music Video Awards, or at least part of them. Okay. They were last night. I did not watch them, but I did take a look at some of the news reporting. This from CNN Style. Compared with Hollywood award ceremonies, the VMAs often see attendees letting loose and showing off their personalities. typically choosing fun, sultry, or experimental outfits over formal suits and ball gowns. Fashion history has also been made there, such as Little Kim's one-sleeve purple jumpsuit and seashell nipple pasty in 1999, or Lady Gaga's infamous meat dress in 2010. Meat dress. This year's event, held at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey, saw performances by Bad Bunny, Nicki Minaj, Jack Harlow, LL Cool J hosted. Yeah, that guy's good. Celebrity fashion watchers also had a lot to celebrate as style darlings, including Taylor Swift, Little Nas X, and Becky G, arrived in show-stopping ensembles. Many stars dressed in dark hues to match the year's black carpet, although they brought outfits to life with fetish wear, such as singer Dove Cameron's thick leather choker, flashes of color like Sabrina Carpenter's rainbow embellishments. Stars also dared to bear, celebrities including Ashley Graham, Tate McRae, Blackpink's Jennie, all flashing their midriffs. Anita and Victoria DeAngelis of Maneskin, meanwhile, paid apparent homage to Little Kim's famed 1999 VMA outfit with fashionable binky covers. Some of the evening, the men bared their torsos, and gender-fluid fashion brought a certain softness to the menswear ensembles, with Maneskin's Ethan Torchio donning a sheer corset. And let me tell you something. I just want to make this plain. Typically, I'm not someone who engages in, say, for example, flattering things to say about men wearing women's clothing. Okay? But let me tell you something. Ethan Torchio in that very sheer corset looked like a flaming idiot. Dude, buy clothes. Wear them. Wear them. Good God in heaven, man. A corset. Looked like an idiot. Now, back to the news. Jeez. So I got some pictures. Here. Why am I so angry? I'm not angry. I'm not angry at all. It's just ridiculous to wear a corset. Come on, Langston. Why are you so obtuse? Can I ask you that question? Anyway, I've got pictures here. Looks like Taylor Swift was wearing like a rhinestone bra with lots of Christmas decorations hanging off of it. Let's see, who was this? Becky G. Yow. Okay. Now, I don't have any problem whatsoever with women wearing women's clothes. And let me tell you, Becky G, hot. Just saying. Let's see who else. Model Ashley Graham. She is a plus size model. She's gorgeous. And she was wearing something scanty. I probably would have put her in something else, but she's gorgeous. Okay, singer Conan Gray wore a white, whimsical Harris Reed ensemble with a lace-trimmed train and blazer and platform shoes. Dude, just saying. Let's see, Sophia Carlson was the picture of elegance in a black hooded column dress with a puffy off-the-shoulder sleeve. Yeah, it was puffy, all right. She sort of looked like she was wearing a black cloud. You know, she looks like, you know, a more Madonna-like Elvira. I'm just saying. Let's see who else. Now, this was good. Jack Harlow, okay? He was one of the hosts. Standard black leather tux with an ascot. Dude, that looked good. I'm just saying, man. Nice pick. Good job. Let's see. Chloe Bailey and Tate McRae. Both of you make me very happy that I'm a mammal. Although I don't really like teal. Let's see what else. Oh, this was good. Then Bob the drag queen wore a gray plaid blazer, fine. Matching vest, fine. And then he wore a dress made out of white dress shirts. Sleeves hanging down, cuffs, nice watch chain. Too much bling on the left lapel. So the winner of this one, as far as John David's Man School, that leather tux looked flippin' great. Narrow lapels, styling. Dude. But the saddle soap bill must be ridiculous. All right, that's all I got today. I hope you enjoyed the broadcast. Share it, subscribe it, and I'll see you tomorrow. All right, beloved friends, have a wonderful time. Have a wonderful time. Thanks very much for joining us, okay? I'm going to get out of here, all right? So peace, love, joy. Have a good evening, y'all.